Today, what I'm going to do is I'm going to talk all things my Alaska trip, and I'm going to try to go as in depth as I can. I don't have, I don't have, um, I'm not sponsored by anybody. This isn't going to be a conversation where somebody's giving me a bunch of money behind to say good things about them. It's not going to be a situation where people come from behind and I say a bunch of bad things about them. I'm just gonna do what I do because at the end of the day, it all comes down to giving good information. And I talk a lot about my early retirement, which is really what the channel's about. But what I also try to do is provide good information on everything. So, anybody that knows me knows that I'm all about giving good information and trying to make sure that the information that's coming across has a factual basis. Does it mean I know everything? Nah. And the reality is, anybody that says they know everything probably doesn't know anything because nobody knows everything. But some people, or a lot of people, spend time trying to convince themselves that they know a lot. So, Dustin Conti, what's happening? Welcome to the community. Welcome to the channel. Welcome to the inaugural live stream. Where are you from? I'm in California. I was just mentioning a little bit earlier. And, we're all around. And I know we have a community of about 800 people, and I'm sure all 800 aren't going to show up today. But at the end of the day, who shows up, and this will be out there in the internet superhighway for everybody to see. But today, again, I'm going to talk about my Alaska trip, and I had the opportunity to take an Alaskan cruise, a 7-night cruise, this past week, and got back this week. So I'm really excited about that, and then just to talk about it, because when I told people a lot of things that happen in my life, when I tell people that this is what I'm doing, then they get surprised. When I said I was graduating from college, people were surprised that I'd actually was going to graduate, because that night before I was out partying like a rock star. When I said I was going to retire, people were surprised that I was going to retire because I was 51 and I was able to retire. It's just one of those things. And I talk about that in a lot of other videos. And then when I told people that I was going on an Alaska cruise, a lot of people said, I really want to go on an Alaska cruise. And it was kind of interesting because, when you think about an Alaska cruise, it's really a bucket list item for a lot of people. I mean, it was for me, it was for my wife, and it was absolutely incredible. Now, in all fairness, I don't have a bunch of pictures that I could flash up. I'll put those. I think I did some shorts, and I'll continue to put things up in the shorts that show you. And if you want to see more, let me know, and I'll make sure you get a copy of them, because there's just a lot of cool stuff about Alaska. It was really a bucket list trip. So. But before I get into it, I do want to mention the FI. The one thing I do want to mention is that I think that it's never my expectation, and I never want to come across pretentious, like I think everybody's supposed to retire early or everybody's supposed to do any of these things. All I'm showing you is that I did it, and if I was able to do it, then I think that it's possible for anybody. A guy from the hood kind of does well. So, but anyway, it looks like people are starting to pop on, and this is talking about timeshares in San Diego. Dorkle or Dorkly 609. Thanks for the piece of information, because all information is good information, even if you don't use it. I just sold my RV, so I'm not gonna probably buy a timeshare, but I'm probably gonna take a little bit more. But we're gonna talk a lot about some of that stuff as we continue to go down the path, because the beautiful thing about bucket list trips and doing things that are on the bucket list is that you have the opportunity to do them and then do other things, and you just continue going down the path. So, but anyway, let me enough about that. Let's get into the trip. So I'm going to talk about a few different areas of my Alaska trip. First, I want to talk about just the trip itself, give you some background about the trip. And then I want to talk about the stops. It was a 7-night cruise, and most of the time when I've gone on cruises, they've talked about 7 days. Well, this one was actually 7 nights, and in all transparency, I packed for 7 days and I didn't pack for 7 nights, and so that was kind of an interesting dynamic that played out. But it was actually on the eighth day that we ended up leaving. I want to talk a little bit about what we did in the casino. Anybody that's been rocking with me for a while knows that my wife and I, one of the things we enjoy is we enjoy going to casinos, and we have a method that we got from some peeps that we watch online called SC Slots, and it's called the ticket method. And the ticket method has us walking out, and we are never broke, baby, because we manage our tickets in such a way that it forces us to leave when it's time to go. And so even though sometimes we take some losses, we still come out with money in our pocket. I want to talk a little bit about the people. Right now is a very interesting time in America, as we can all imagine. And again, this isn't a political channel. I'm not trying to get political, nor am I going to go down that path. But there's a lot of dynamics that come into play, particularly because this cruise went out of Canada. I don't know if that glitched, so I apologize. A call just came in, but the food. I want to talk a little bit about the food that we had, because when you talk about going on cruises, food is a major part of it, and so you can't talk about a cruise without talking about the food and our experience with the food and so on. And then I'll give you my overall impressions. And I'll do this in relation to some of the other cruises that we have gone on, because I think it's hard if you've never been on a cruise with a particular cruise line to understand the quality of that cruise unless you do it in reference to something else and type of a comparison. I generally am not one to compare one thing to another that way, because I think it's unfair, because everything is different and unique and special in its own way. But I do think it's important to compare, because I've had the opportunity and the ability to be able to compare. But they all bring some different value. And then I'll talk a little bit about what's next. And I would encourage you to ask any questions that you have. And I'm going to try to answer the questions as they come in. I mean, the beauty of this live stream is there's not a million people on here, and I could probably get to all of the comments and questions, and I'll just try to read them off. And so if you see me looking down, I'm looking at my notes. If I'm looking to the side, I'm looking at my iPad that has the comments on it, and then we'll get going. So just to get started, all right, that's it for the coffee. The trip itself, it was a 7-night celebrity cruise to Alaska, and we took the path that's called the Inside Passage. When we went on our cruise a couple of years ago to the Panama Canal, it was really rocky. And so what we decided to do was try to find an experience that was going to take us in waters that were a little less rocky. And we figured that if we go to Alaska, which is a place we wanted to see, we take the Inside Passage, because it brings you on these inland waterways that shield you from all the motion of the ocean. No pun intended. And but it went out of Vancouver, British Columbia, not Vancouver, Washington, but Vancouver, British Columbia. And so we got in early, and we were able to enjoy Vancouver for a couple of days. And Vancouver's a really interesting city. I made a video about it while I was there, and I just think Vancouver is just an incredible city, because it's almost like a mix between like a Seattle and a San Francisco, and it's just interesting. And the way they focus on trying to take care of their people. Now, I'm not going to say that it's some utopia, because I know they have challenges just like we have challenges in the States. And I know I've mentioned I'm from California, and so we all know that when you have a state as populous as California, you're going to have the top, the bottom, and all the people in the margins. And so I'm not going to say that it's perfect. And when I start talking about some of the people I met, I'll talk to you a little bit about some of the conversations. But we got up there, and the weather was perfect. It was 65, 70 degrees. We were able to walk around, just check out the city, and it's just everywhere it's green. A lot of you may or may not know, if you've been rocking with me for a while, again, that I'm a UC Master Gardener. And so as a Master Gardener, one of the things that I'm really enamored by are the plants and the wildlife and all that. And so just to be able to see the greenery, different plants, different growing things, and so on. So we got there, we stayed there for about 2 days. And then on the third day, we took off and we went on our cruise. We got on at the port of Vancouver. It was great. It was easy. It probably took us about an hour. We went on YouTube, the source of all truth. And in some of the videos that we were watching, we saw that it could take hours and hours and hours. But we had done, and I advise anybody that takes a cruise, make sure that you prepare ahead of time, because if you prepare ahead of time, then you have all your documents filled out, you have all your passports and everything like that filled out. So you don't have to, or your customs declarations and so on filled out. So then you could go straight through the line. And so we were able to expedite at certain bottlenecks, expedite straight through and get to where it is that we were trying to go. So it was great. We got on the ship within the hour, and it was absolutely incredible. And so, and the stops that this cruise made is, and I'll just go through each day so you could kind of get an idea, is that it started with a sea day. So to get us through the choppy water, and I think cruises do this on purpose, is that in order to get through the choppy water, they'll create a sea day, because then there's a bunch of activities and there's a lot of things going on that keep you distracted. And they have a lot of raffles, a lot of giveaways. And my wife and I love raffles. We love winning stuff. It's not that we need the stuff that we get, but we like winning things. And so there was a game show, and there was a bunch of raffles, and the casino was open in the evening, which was great because it gave us something to do at night. And, because we're not late night party animals, we're not the Spuds McKenzies of the world. We were able to do our thing and get to the casino and get to bed at a reasonable hour. I think maybe 10 o'clock, 11 o'clock, but we were just wiped out. And I think what you find is that on these cruises, when you're walking around, you're actually using more energy than you think you are. And I was looking at my Apple Watch and my stats, and I realized that on my stats, it said that I had been doing a whole bunch of exercise. And interestingly enough, since I've gotten home, I realized that I've lost some weight. So most people go on cruises and they gain weight. So the next stop that we had was this place called Icy Point. And Icy Point is where they say that you're going to be able to you're going to be able to see whales and so on. And Icy Point Strait, it's a quick, small stop where you get in, and there's not much there. There's a gift shop. Every port has a million gift shops and diamond shops and everything, but you have a little port. And then you have a gondola that takes you. There's two gondolas. There's one gondola that takes you to the other side of the forest, and then there's a gondola that takes you up the mountain. So, and there's a walking trail that takes you around to an area where you can see the water and you can see whales and so on. So we took that walk. And again, as a gardener, I was looking at the plants. We were looking at the wildlife. We were looking at everything that I learned in my master gardener class. I was able to see there, such as the fungi on the trees that have fallen over, to see the disease on the inside, different types of plants, different types of wildlife. It was absolutely incredible. And we walked over, and there wasn't much there. But when we got to the end, we were looking out. You could see the water. You could see the whale watching boats. But by that time, we were like, you know what? It's time to get back to the ship, because for us, unlike a lot of other people, my wife and I, we like each other, and so we just tend to just hang out. So we took the gondola back over to the ship. But lo and behold, somebody tells us a little while earlier that they saw a whale. So they're looking at the whale watching boat that was in the water, and then they see a whale. So I didn't see any whale. Well, we saw a whale later on, but we'll talk about that a little. It was kind of an undercover whale. It's like Undercover Brother, but it was undercover whale. But it was pretty neat, because we saw this whale, and but anyway, so we get back and we go to the ship, and I decide I'm going to go up to I'm going to take the gondola that goes all the way up. There's a gondola that goes from the bottom of where the port is, and it takes you all the way up to the top of the mountain. Then on top of the mountain, there's a zip line that goes down. And folks, I never realized how loud zip lines were. And I'm 6'8". I would stand up for you, but I already know that I'm taking enough time on this video. So so, but there's these zip lines that come down, and the whole idea is to get you up the mountain, take the zip line down, then you zip line. But I didn't do that. I wasn't going to zip line. I'm too big for that. I didn't want to hurt myself. Didn't want to mess my knees up and so on. So I took the gondola up and down. Again, I got shots of that I think I put in a different video. And if you can't find them, let me know, because I may have forgotten to put them in the other video. And in which case, I'll put them in the next video, because that's what I do. But it was incredible. We got back to the ship and we were leaving out. So now what was funny is when we were coming into Icy Point, and they said that in Icy Point Strait, that's where you're going to see all of your whales. We were out on our balcony looking for whales, looking for whales, looking for whales. And folks, it was like 48 degrees. So right now at home, it's 90 degrees. There, it was like 48 degrees, 47. It was insane. So, but we were out there looking, and I look down and I see this black thing with kind of these gray speckles, and it had to have been 30 feet long, just under the water, float right by the ship. Now, most people would say that that's not really that big of a deal, but the reality is we went to Hawaii some years back. We were on a big island for my wife's best friend's birthday, and we saw whales breaching and jumping out of the water. So it wasn't as much seeing whales jumping out of the water, because you normally see that at a distance anyway. But what we were able to see was a whale up close. So it was like our own personal whale, but in a safe space, because our balcony was high enough to where it wasn't going to create a problem. I mean, it was a cruise ship with 2,500 of my 3,000 of my closest friends. So at the end of the day, it wasn't going to be something that was going to knock over the boat, but we were able to see it probably as close as the people in Marine World. So I thought that was pretty cool. And that made the trip. The next stop we had was a place called Skagway. And Skagway was the stop that we were waiting for, because there were two things that happened at Skagway that were just kind of bucket list things. One, Skagway has this train that goes up through the mountains. And so Skagway, historically, and again, I'm not a historian, and I don't claim to be one. I don't even play one on TV or on YouTube. But from what I could surmise, the gold rush was really big in Skagway. And so they created these train systems, and they had explorers that would go up the mountains. So there's a bunch of history. Well, there's a train that hugs the mountain and goes all the way up about 2,800 feet, I believe. And off to the side, there are historical landmarks. There's just nature. You have these incredible waterfalls. There was still snow on the mountains. It was great. I mean, it was just one of those things that if you haven't seen it, and if you go to Alaska, you should use your if you're going to use resources to go on an excursion, go on the Skagway train. It was recommended to me by my buddy, my 86-year-old buddy that told me about his trip to Alaska. And what was beautiful about ours is that when we booked it, we got some, not free play, but what do you call it? What's that stuff called? Onboard credit. So we got this onboard credit, and the onboard credit covered the cost of that. But the other thing that we did in Skagway was I was able to eat an Alaska king crab. And I'd been waiting for this, because you can't go to a place like Alaska and not eat king crab, because it's the most incredible. And I go to the grocery store and I get king crab legs that are probably about this big. I had a king crab leg that went from here, the top of my finger, just beyond my elbow. And so if you can imagine, when you have an 8-foot wingspan like I do, how long that is. And that sucker was good. We be grubbing. No, it was incredible. I mean, the guy told me, now let me tell you that the crab leg was $100. The meal was $100. So did they rip me off? Sure they did. But you don't really get ripped off when you're on vacation, because you don't go on vacation expecting everything to be normal price. Not even the diamonds from Diamonds International. But I digress. But he said that these are actually easier to eat because the meat gets out a little bit faster or a little bit easier because they're bigger pieces. And so you just cut them up the middle. The shell's really soft. Cut them up the middle, pull that meat out, and devour that sucker. And that's exactly what we did. So Skagway was a great experience. And part of the idea of having the what's the gold mining and stuff like that up there is that you also have the opportunity to, or I guess you can go into town, and in town everything's built around that. So you have the opportunity to see and learn a bunch from that, and see and learn from about the settlers. I don't want to call them settlers, the gold miners. You learn about what was going on, and you start to get some perspective about what's the size of some of the places they were in, how big were just different historical facts. And most of the time it was raining, it was 40 degrees, it was cold, but everything was easy. The next day was the day. What's that song? I still haven't found what I'm looking for. At 6 o'clock in the morning, 5 o'clock in the morning, they started moving up towards the Dawes Glacier. Now, it's hard for me to express what you see when you're looking out at a glacier. As we move up to it, there's these big pieces of ice that are just floating. So any of you that are still working or you read self-help books, there's always the graphic of the iceberg, and they say most of the iceberg is below water. It's true. We had big pieces of ice that had caught, I think they call it calving, whatever, off of the glacier, and they just float around because the water's so cold, the air's cold, nothing melts, and nothing is disturbed. So the only thing disturbing it are cruise ships and wildlife. So we had the opportunity to experience untouched nature. And our captain, and I don't know if this is true or not, but it sounds good. He said this is the closest that he's ever been able to get to the glacier. Now, the problem with a lot of this is as we were cruising up, what you could see from the side of on the side of the glacier, on the side of the water, is you see these big, smooth granite rocks. So it's like if you have a granite countertop, imagine having granite countertops that are miles and miles tall and long with waterfalls coming down. So that's what we were looking at the entire time. Now, let me tell you, as we were going down, the one thing they said was up to this point, because you could see where the vegetation stopped, it was obvious. So where the vegetation stopped, you then started to see, they said that's where the glaciers used to be up to about 10 years ago. And so when you start looking at things like climate change or global warming and the real impact that has as sea level rise, when you're up there, it starts to really give you a perspective of what all of this stuff means. Because let's face it, in the cities that most of us live in, besides maybe warmer temperatures or more rain or more snow, we don't really see the effects. But when you start to think about this permafrost, or you start thinking about glaciers that are melting, and you start putting markers together to be able to actually see the difference, it's something else. And so we were able to see that as we move. So it really was a humbling experience and helped me understand how big this world really is. Because if you're like me, you tend to see a lot of stuff and think you know a lot of stuff, and then realize that there's just so much that we don't know, and it's nothing wrong with that. It kind of is what it is, but it was humbling. So we did that in the morning, and then in the afternoon, we went to Juneau, which is the capital of Alaska. No, I'm sorry, we went to Ketchikan, which is a fishing town in Alaska, and Ketchikan is really just a small town, and most of these places that we went to, you can't get there anyway except for airplane, is it plane or boat. And so us and the people that fly in the planes are the only ones, and you could see the planes. The planes were all the seaplanes that go in off the water and such were all right there. So, but we got to Ketchikan, and Ketchikan, there wasn't a lot to it. We had some good food. They had some. I was able to eat Dungeness crab because, and the funny thing was, I was looking for shrimp, but I think shrimp is fresh. If any of you know, please say it in the comments. But I think shrimp is a warm water organism, and I think crab is for cooler water. And so I was looking for shrimp, but they couldn't find anything but crab, and I love crab. So, and it was all steamed crab, fresh out of the water, and I had some Dungeness crab. So I was able to have a king crab over in where is it? Over in was it Icy Point? Then I was able to have a Dungeness crab over in Ketchikan, catch if you can. And so we walked around Ketchikan, had some crab, ate a little bit, and got back on the ship. There wasn't a whole lot to it because the one thing I could tell you is that the thing I was looking for from a souvenir perspective was I wanted to get something whimsical for my garden, and I could find everything. I was able to find ulu knives, which are those round knives that they cut with. I was able to find a bunch of crap. I didn't buy any of it, just so you know, but I was really looking for something whimsical that I could put in my garden. But unfortunately, I wasn't able to do that. So, it is what it is. Sometimes, like my dad used to say, it bees that way sometimes. And so we weren't able to find that. But there were plenty of shops. If any of you like to go out and buy crap, there is plenty of crap to be bought and any of these places. There's like 5 Diamond International stores, then there's Blue Diamond International, and it's all tourist trap. And as you talk to people, some of the local people, they tell you it's a tourist trap, and they don't like it. And then the last place, and again, I may have gotten this mixed up, and I think I may have, but I know that these are the places we went. They may have been in a slightly different order, but is Juneau. And Juneau is the capital of Alaska. So we had the opportunity to walk around Juneau, and there wasn't a whole lot to Juneau. Again, it was a lot of shops. It was there was I can't remember. I think it was like a conservation place that was up there that we saw, and we didn't go in because I think it was closed that day. And we just walked and had just had fun walking around town. We went to a brewery, and in this brewery, I was able to pick up an Alaskan brewery cup or something like that, and it was cool. But it was cool because I think what happens is people go to Alaska and they spend a bunch of money on excursions, but what ends up happening is that hey, retired 2019, what's happening, my man or woman, as it were. But what happens a lot of times is you go on vacation, especially on cruises, and this is what I think hurts some of our experience, is that we go on cruises and then we get so caught up in the excursions that you come back to the ship just to relax. And the idea is to go on the cruise just to relax. And we like to just be able to relax on the cruise. So we don't do a bunch of excursions because we just experience what's going on. We try to talk to local people. When we went, it's funny, just a little side story. One time we went to the Bahamas, actually on our honeymoon, we got married, we went to the Bahamas, and instead of taking an Uber or whatever, we got on a city bus and we rode the city bus. When we went to Hawaii, to Waikiki, we went to Pearl Harbor and rode the city bus back from Pearl Harbor because we wanted to see what it was like. And so it's just an interesting place to be. You see a lot of stuff. There's a lot of nature, and I think if we can allow ourselves, and I think that's what retirement allows us to do, is that if we could slow ourselves down and really slow our thinking down, it puts us in a place where we can appreciate more. There's a story I used to tell when I used to do public speaking, and it was talking about the time that I couldn't find my keys, and I went all around the house looking for my keys, and I was late to work. And then I hit my pocket and realized that the keys were in my pocket. And I'll tell you, folks, the keys are in your pocket. So if you're the natural beauty that you need is all right there in front of you, and it's there to be had. So I would suggest that instead of and these excursions get expensive. I mean, I'm on a fixed income. I mean, we're not super struggling or nothing. We're not on a struggle bus. I'm not trying to get fare on the struggle bus, but you're looking at excursions that cost $500, $1,000, and it's cool, but it's like buying crap at a gift shop. It's cool for that experience, but the bigger experience is going to be meeting the people, talking to people, and so on. So that's, speaking of people, I'll talk a little bit about that, because I think that, no cruise is complete when you think about cruising. Retired 2019, thank you for the comment. I appreciate it. It's good to get that feedback, because this YouTube life is a lonely life. It's lonely out here. it's hard for a player. No, I'm just kidding. But anyway, but you can't go on a cruise because you're surrounded by 3,500 or 3,000 of your closest friends, and you don't. And that's going to make up a majority of the ship. And I think coming out of, and I would recommend to any of you that if you have the opportunity to take a cruise out of a foreign port. Because if you take a cruise, let's say for us, it's out of San Francisco or Long Beach or Los Angeles or something like that, or even at back east, if you go out of Boston or New York or Florida, it's primarily going to be Americans. And so you kind of know what to expect. I hate to say it, but Americans are fairly predictable. I think that's a blessing and a curse. And on this cruise, it was more of an international cruise, because right now, and again, this is from speaking to other people, that people are apprehensive about traveling to the United States because such a tumultuous time. And again, I'm not getting political, but I'm just speaking of facts. And as I spoke to people, I realized that a lot of people felt safer going to Canada to go out on their cruise than they might have felt coming to the States. And so what they did is they took the cruise out of Vancouver. So it was an international cruise. The vibe was a little bit different because, Europeans and Australians and New Zealanders and all those folks that came up to go on that cruise, and even Canadians, just have a different way of moving. All of the pleases and thank yous and let me get the door for you and excuse me's. They don't do all that. They're just like, hey, move, get out the way. This is where I'm going. And that's where it's at. And if you have a conversation, the conversation is going to be 100% real. In a lot of cases, it's never anybody. No, I'm not going to stereotype one way or the other, but but the conventions, the social conventions are different. And so you have the opportunity to experience that and understand things in a different way. But it was also an opportunity to understand, how do Canadians feel about Canada? How do Canadians feel about Americans? How do Canadians feel about this political climate? How did the U.S. election impact the Canadian election? How, what are some of the focuses socially on people there? So we had the opportunity to experience that. And it was kind of interesting, because I think on that cruise, the Americans were actually the minority. So you had, we had what I call the John Deere contingent, because a lot of folks that were there were from the northern part of the Midwest, and coming from farms, and they were big on John Deere. So I had the opportunity to have conversations with people from that part of the country, and I truly believe that in general, most people have the same set of needs. They want to take care of their family. They want to be able to feed their family, make a little bit of money, do what they need to do, and have a little fun and just live their lives. There's just different views on doing that. And so I had a conversation with a guy about vaccines, and that vaccines work, and I follow the science. And he didn't necessarily believe that, but he was on a farm and probably only saw 5 people a year. So he wouldn't have had anything except for what he saw on the news. And so depending on your news outlet, or depending on where you get your information, that's going to be your perspective. So I had the opportunity to have that conversation. Had the opportunity to talk to somebody about the social service component from Vancouver, and how they the efforts that they put into issues of addiction, and how they've tried some things that didn't work and are continuing to try different things. And so my point being, you have the opportunity to experience things in a different way. And you could start to see where some of the Americans, being the minority on the ship, they would act out because that sense of insecurity of not being kind of the dominant figure in the room, and really kind of being an NPC, what we call a non-player character. We had these NPC, they were kind of these NPCs, so they would do these things. Like we were at a bar and one guy got ornery at the bar. There was a a couple other things where they were given instructions and they want to do their own thing because that's what Americans do. But they were quickly corrected, not just by them, but also some of the other passengers. And so, retired 2019, it was a celebrity cruise, and I'm going to talk a little bit more about that as we get down the path because there's some pieces of that I do want to talk a little bit about. And then, but yeah, so there were some great conversations that happened, and these were, just a lot of different cats. There's a lot of different cats. So if you like people, but you like real conversation, and folks, if you're listening to me, it's all I give you is what I know and what's real, because again, it's me sharing my experience with you. So hopefully it can help inspire you, because if I can do it, you can do it. And if I can do it, then it becomes a requirement for you to live your best life. Not necessarily retire, because I know there's a financial component. We're not all in control of that. But in terms of, living our best lives, we all have the obligation to do that. And sometimes we keep ourselves from doing that because we have all these other obligations. And at the end of the day, your most valuable resource is time. And if you talk to any 80, 90-year-old, they're going to tell you that there's a bunch of things they wish they would have done different, but they were too busy worried about what other people thought, what other people did, so on and so forth, and etc. So anyhow, so now I want to talk a little bit about the casino. This is, there's a guy that that's given me comments a few times on this channel, a guy named Julio Blanco. It doesn't look like he's able to make it today, but anyway, my wife and I, we like to go to casinos. We talk about it all the time. We're not making casino videos because, it's just not we don't go like that. We just go to have fun, and we enjoy going to casinos. But I'll tell you, Celebrity Cruise, they got my vote for the best casino at sea, because I walked in, I was playing Huff and Puff. Anybody that do any of you ever go to casinos, and do you know Huff and Puff? Well, let me tell you, Huff and Puff paid this brother man out $1,100 on the first night. And if you don't believe me, I got pictures. If you want to see pictures, let me know. I'll put them up. I'll put up a short with them. But I won $1,100. And it was by accident, because I thought I was betting $2, but I was actually betting $4. And then I won $1,100. Well, we played, and remember, this is a 7-night cruise. So every night we went to the casino. So we went to the casino 7 nights straight. Then the last sea day, the last day before we went to port for the end of the cruise, there was a slot tournament. So now you have to understand there's in 3 rounds, and each round, I think, are 12 people in each round. You just pull a slot machine and you hit the button, right? It's pretty fun. Now, here's the crazy part about it. So the round that my wife and I were in, we were in the second round. So in the second round, my wife and I, we love each other and we enjoy each other, but we both have kind of these type A types of tendencies, right? And so, I'm not gonna let her win, but I'm gonna encourage her if she does. It's kind of that love-hate thing when it comes to competitions between us, because that's just how we roll. So she wins the round, I come in second. So I'm like, you know what? That's cool, because as long as I think it was the top 7 or top 10 go to the final round. So I said, okay, I'll get her in the final round. My wife, I came in 5th in the final round, and my wife won that sucker. She won $500. And she's like, I thought it was going to be free play. And we're like, no, it's not free play. Went up to the cashier, and they gave us $500. So we won $500, or she won, what do you say? What's hers is her, what's mine is mine, and what's hers is mine. I guess that's probably supposed to be the other way around, but since she's not here, I'm gonna roll with that one. But anyway, she won $500, and so what was beautiful was that every single night, because we use what we call the ticket method, which is if we get a bonus game, we get the bonus game, we do 3 backup spins, we take that ticket out of the machine, put that ticket away, and then start with a new, if you're starting with 20s, or if you're starting with 100s, and we go, and then when we're out of cash, then we stop. And then we go and we cash in what we can cash in, as opposed to just keeping the play and keeping playing, because then you end up broke. Then you end up, as they say, putting it all back. And I don't want to do that. G. Harden, you did an Alaska cruise in 23 as your first cruise. That was a great first cruise. It's hey, if you go back, let me know. We might roll up there with you, because we enjoyed it too. But the so it's funny. So we come out. So net we came back. Now I'm going to tell you this. I got to be honest. I got to keep it a buck with you because that's what I do. Is that we gave some of it back, but but comma we came out $900 ahead. So we went in and we came out $900 up. So the cruise ship paid us for going to their casino, which was beautiful. So again, I think Celebrity Cruises are the number one casino at sea. I'm not sponsored by them or anybody else. Everything you get from me is unadulterated, and it's my own perspective, just like this or anything else I talk about in the rest of the channel. But it was fun. It was just great. The last thing I'll talk about before I get into my overall impressions and give you that comparison I was talking about is the food. One thing I'll tell you about Celebrity is like a resort. So if you ever go to like a place like Mexico, or you go to the Caribbean, or you go to Puerto Rico and you go to these resorts, they're really nice and there's a lot of stuff included, and then they have a tendency to charge you for other things and kind of nickel and dime you. Well, Celebrity doesn't nickel and dime. Their restaurants are really expensive. So their dining, what do you call them? Specialty. Your specialty dining is really expensive. So we didn't do it. We said, forget that, because we eat good at home. See, the thing about us is that our home is so comfortable. And we set it up that going on vacation actually kind of cramps our style. Let me know what you think too, because it becomes work to go on vacation. And if I wanted to eat a good steak, I eat a good steak at home. Now, I did order a steak, and it wasn't exactly what I wanted, but there were a few places that we ate that we thought were good. Is that first there was we went to the buffet, and the buffet was pretty good. It's quick in, quick out, easy, especially for lunch. We had breakfast delivered to the room every morning because you're dealing with time changes, and we were just tired from being on that ship. But the buffet is really well done, and the ice cream station stays open late, and the pizza station, I think, is 24 hours, so you can always get pizza. So if you indulge in adult beverages, which I do, then it gives you the opportunity to get something to soak it up. There's another restaurant that's called Lumine. Now, we had a suite when we went on this cruise. We just had this thing about perpetuating the comfort because so we got a suite, and we had the same table, and it was a specific table because we didn't want a table by the window, because when the ship's moving, then it creates kind of that sea leggy feeling, that feeling that you don't want to have when you're at sea. So we had this table in the corner, and we had the same waiter the whole time. I met the manager. His name is Antes or Andy or something like that, but he was I think Serbian or Bosnian, but he was played basketball professionally for them. So we had these conversations, and the playoffs were going off at the same time. So we had these conversations. So every night we would have these conversations. But he was just a cool cat. Cool restaurant. Service was good, and the beauty about this restaurant is that it was kind of foo-foo, and I'm probably a little more basic, but it was kind of foo-foo. It had foo-foo stuff on the menu, but you can also get the menu from the main dining room, and so we got the menu from the main dining room, and some nights I got what was on there. So like the lobster, for example, I didn't want a bunch of sauce and crazy stuff on my lobster. I just wanted the lobster. So when I ordered lobster, you hear on these other YouTube channels how they charge you extra for extra lobster and all those types of things. Well, here they didn't do that. The guy brought me 2 lobster tails because I'd been going there the whole time. So, but you had the opportunity to do that, and the food was really good. Had salads, and they had these little, I don't know what you call them, but it's like a little tray thing or a little cup, and you had like something to open up your palate so you can appreciate the food. And I was like, it looked to me like an appetizer, like a appetizer. So whatever. Do you, boo? But it was cool. It was just a great overall experience. Then there was this place. Any of you that have ever sailed with Princess know about the International Cafe. Well, there's this place on the Celebrity Cruises called Cafe Baccio, and basically what they'll have is they'll do coffee and they'll do these small sandwiches. So it's a place that if you or cruising, you just want to get a little snack, you want to get something, put something in your stomach, or let's say you're feeling queasy, upset stomach. No, I'm just kidding. Nausea, heartburn, indigestion, upset stomach. Then you go there, you get a little sandwich, and there are little turkey sandwiches, or there'll be just a bunch, or little desserts, tarts and stuff. My wife got the tarts, little tarts and stuff like that. But it was a little bit like that, and so you don't go and have a whole meal, but you'll go and have a little snack during the day, so that way you continue to keep stuff, in your stomach, keep your stomach settled, and so on. So again, that's like the International Cafe if you ever cruise on Princess. And then there was the Mast Grill, and that's basically your pool grill. There wasn't a lot to it. The drinks were good. The food was good. Had a burger there. Burger didn't have as much flavor as, let's say, an In-N-Out burger, but it was a good burger considering the circumstances because, I don't know if you guys agree with me, but if you ever have a burger, it's either burgers are usually one of two things. They're either good or they're really bad. And so it was good. Let's leave it at that. And so those are kind of the major pieces. And so now what I want to do is give you some overall impressions of the Celebrity Cruise because my experience is my experience, and I'm sure each of you would have a different experience, which is great. And if you have had one, let me know. And this is going to go up live or it's going to go up on the channel, so you'll be able to comment into perpetuity, as they say on Shark Tank, into perpetuity. But I do want to compare this to other, and so I've cruised with three cruise lines. I've cruised with Carnival. I mean, I think there's a point in our life where everybody sails with Carnival. I think Carnival now has a different reputation than it used to, but at that time, that reputation probably didn't matter. And I'll talk a little bit about that in a second. I've cruised a few times with Princess, and I cruise with Celebrity. And so in relation, I think I talked a little bit earlier about you have to kind of compare these in relation to each other. And so I would say that on the Celebrity Cruise, I would give the food a B. I thought the food was good. It was okay, but I think sometimes, there are restaurants that maybe do too much. And so I like things that are basic. And I think I didn't necessarily want all the foo-foo because it's one thing if you get the foo-foo and you like it, but if you don't want it, then what's the other option? But if the whole menu's foo-foo, then you have an issue. So having that ability to get the main dining room menu is great, but you kind of feel greedy when you're doing it because you've got all of these, you've got two menus there, and there's people looking at you like, why is this person getting everything on the menu? And I'm like, because I'm hungry and I'm 6'8" and I do what the hell I want to do. Then socially, I would say that it's a B. I got to tell you that I love America. No, I'm just kidding. I just didn't have some of the interactions that I would have normally have had, and I don't think this is a subject of the cruise line. I think the service was great. I thought the people that worked on the cruise were great. I thought the staff that I had the opportunity to meet were incredibly friendly. I thought they did a great job of communicating. But when I think about myself and other places, it's one of those things that it's hard sometimes because I think when you think about people and if you pay attention to people when they're talking, they'll talk about like for people that look like me, they'll say being a black face in a white space and how you have to be cognizant of maybe different things because not everybody's necessarily always going to be happy that you're there. I'm not saying everybody's this or everybody's that, but I'm just saying you just know that you're different. Well, on this cruise, it was kind of that too because again, I'm used to certain conventions and I've learned how to move and navigate in different circles. But sometimes I think some of that hostility and it's not subject to the cruise line. I think it's more of just the people. But again, I could just share my experience in terms of what I experienced. But I met some great people. On my last Princess cruise, I met a guy named Edwin, and Edwin and I we became fast friends, and that was 2 years ago, and we're still friends today. And we talk. We don't talk every day. I mean, he's out in Florida, but we talk enough to stay in touch and know what's going on. He was going on a cruise the same day I was going on a cruise, but he was going on a different cruise back east. So, but I didn't find myself getting into those types or creating any of those types of deep connections through the course of the cruise. So I gave it a B. Is it an A? No. Is it a C? No. It was good. It was fine. It was what you would expect. Now, when I look at the room, I would give the room an A. We had a suite. We had what was called a sky suite, so it was kind of the middle of the road suite. Um, it was the way it was kind of interesting because the bed is over to the left and the TV was to the right, and you have to turn the TV. And I tend to sleep on my left side, and so it was kind of an interesting thing where I would have to turn over and then look over my wife in order to watch TV. But of all the things in this world right now to complain about, let me say this again. Of all of the things in this world right now and each of our lives that we have to complain about, of all of the 99 problems, I feel bad for you, son. I got 99 problems, but my room wasn't one. So let me be very clear. I'm not going to bash the room because of the TV, but it was great because we had the balcony, the TV, and we had enough space. What was nice is we had enough space to sit. And on Princess, when we were on the Princess cruise, our suite had the bed and you had a little bit of a different room. So if I wanted to sit on the couch and I couldn't have a conversation really because I'd have to talk through the room. So you end up sitting, that effect as you sit on the bed. But in this cruise, they had it all kind of in one big studio, almost like a big studio apartment with a balcony. So I give the room an A. And then the staff was just phenomenal. I mean, I had one run in with the staff when there was a staff member that I think was telling me that they can make a cucumber gimlet. Or I asked him if he can make a cucumber gimlet. Then he says, well, no, I want a cucumber martini. He said, we make a cucumber martini. And I'm like, well, I think a cucumber martini is different than a cucumber gimlet. And then he says, well, tell me how to make it. And I'm like, well, if I knew how to make the drink, I'd make it myself. I wouldn't ask you. It just became this whole conversation at the bar. And so, but I think he was trying to put himself in position and not say no. Then somebody else came over and I said, you know what, the hell with it. Let me just have a cucumber martini. Had had actually two of those. And after the second one, you don't really care anyway. So it's all good. And then, so the staff was good. So, but the caveat that I give to all of that is I think that different cruise lines are set up for different stages of life. I think Carnival is good for younger people because if you can go on like a 4-day cruise, number one, when you're 25, 30 years old, you're probably not going to get enough time off of work to go on a 10-day cruise or a 7-day cruise. It is what it is. And you're not going to be thinking about that because you would have used your sick time to go out and party with your friends and do other stuff. So, you have these 3-4-day cruises, they're inexpensive and they're party cruises. And that's great. When I was in my 20s and 30s, I loved it because I like to party, I like to drink, I like to have fun. And then, as you get older, things change. And so the opposite end of that is Princess. What we found on Princess is that just older clientele. It's a lot more classic, the feel. And again, it could be the ships we were on, but it was a more classic feel. Older clientele. One time I had a guy come up to me, he was probably 80 years old and told me that my tailor did a good job on my suit. Now, I don't know if he was trying to pick up on me, but when I was sitting with my wife and, I just didn't think, he meant anything bad by that, but that's the type of cruise it is. It's a little different. I think people are a little more formal. It's older clientele. And I think celebrity kind of hits right in the middle of that. I would say that on this cruise, the clientele on average, because there were some older people on there, don't get me wrong, and there were some younger people on there too. Not a lot of kids, but there were some. I think that's made for maybe, I would say, from 40 to 60. And so that's perfect because again, I'm 53 and that was the right cruise. So I think, depending on the stage of life, that's going to be the type of experience you're looking for. And some people, I have a buddy of mine who's 10 years younger than me, but acts like he's 5 years older than me. So different people are going to have different strokes for different folks. But I do think that, they're made for, different stages of life. And so this one fit us perfect because it was like going to like an all-inclusive resort. And it wasn't an old clientele, it wasn't an incredibly young clientele, but everything around it was fairly appropriate. So, so that's kind of my caveat to the cruise. So some of you may be wondering as I start to wrap up, what's next for Sabado? There's a couple things that I have going on. Next month, my aunt called me, and I hadn't spoken to my aunt since my father passed away, which was about 6 or 7 years ago. And she called me up and said that another aunt is having a 50th wedding anniversary in Chattanooga, Tennessee. So I'm going to go out for that, but I'm going to go to that party just for the day. But my best friend also lives in Atlanta, and my other really good friend also lives in Atlanta. So I'm going to fly to Atlanta, spend a week out there, be able to spend time with both of them and their families, then go to Chattanooga. So that's another one that I have. And then we have my wife and I have a couple of road trips scheduled. I think I mentioned before that we recently sold the RV just to clear up some capital to be able to do other things. And just because basically we're spending money on it, we weren't using it as much as we thought we would because we really enjoy staying at home. I mean, that's again keeping it a buck. That's kind of where it's at. But we're gonna take some road trips, so we're thinking about going up the Pacific Northwest, up to Oregon. I got some people I know up in Oregon and Washington. We're thinking about going back east, maybe driving out to Mount Rushmore, driving out to Yellowstone, driving down to the Grand Canyon. Driving out to Nevada, just a bunch of places. If there's places that you think are interesting, let me know. And because one of the places that we learned about on the ship were from a Canadian couple, and they were talking about Nova Scotia, and we've been thinking about going to Maine so I could try some Maine lobster, enjoy Maine, and then maybe go up to Nova Scotia, because Nova Scotia, from what I understand, has these picturesque landscapes and so on. And because my wife and I just like to chill, that's perfect for us. So that's, I know this was a long video. It was longer than, Yosemite. I've never been to Yosemite, and Yosemite is only about 3 hours. My wife told me, we got to go to Yosemite. It's only 3 hours away. And I'm like, man, we got to go. But, it's like when I lived in New York, I never saw the Statue of Liberty. It's just one of those things. It wasn't until I was 45 that I saw Alcatraz. Because, when you live in San Francisco, you don't go to Alcatraz. It's a tourist. Well, in San Francisco, it's probably a little too expensive when you're a kid, but that's a whole nother conversation. But yeah, we're heading out to. So we're gonna be heading out. We're gonna be doing some things, checking out some different things, and just traveling in a different way. And I'm gonna keep bringing those forward because, again, it's the idea here isn't for me to brag to people about here's all the things that we're doing, but I think I talk a lot on the channel about. I think that we all are institutionalized when it comes to work. And I think it's hard for us until we get out of the situation to understand what's on the other side. What is the business of managing your life look like when you don't have this, 40, 50, 60 hour a week obligation? And what do you actually do with your time? People say, are you bored? And I'm like, no, I'm not bored. I'm busier now than I probably was when I was working, but I'm doing things that are moving my life forward and that are moving me forward and that I'm feeling good about. And so, so I just share those with you because I think there's one of the big challenges that people have that don't want to retire is they say, well, what am I going to do with my time? Which I think translates into the question of meaning, right? What's my purpose? And you could find a purpose. And part of my purpose is providing this information to you and letting you know, here's kind of what I'm doing and here's what's going on. And I try not to get too technical because, I'm not a financial advisor and I'm not trying to sell you anything. I'm selling you on an idea that you might be able to do. And I talk a little bit about minimizing expenses and stuff like that. So, take a look and maybe subscribe to the channel for something that you're interested in or something you're not here to know any more about. But thank you, Retired 2019. I know you've been rocking with me for a while, so I appreciate it. And but I just don't want people to think that it's that living their best life is out of reach. Because I think for a lot of us, we've gotten so used to the struggle that we internalize that as being normal. And it's almost like people that are in abusive relationships, they internalize it as being normal, and then it makes it different down the world. So, I think, in the comments, incurable, treatable cancer. Congratulations on being in remission. I know that cancer is a big thing. I recently had some people that I know that succumbed to that, and it was terminal for them. But I'm glad you retired too. I just think when you talk to retired people, you realize that there's a point where you realize that there's so much more that you could have done that you didn't do because you thought you had obligation to do everything else. And don't get me wrong, I do believe that we do have obligations and so on, but we got to make sure we take care of ourselves, because we get so busy taking care of everybody else, we don't take care of ourselves, and then at some point we become no good to others because we're not able to take care of ourselves. So, all right, so I've been on now for about an hour, and hour 1 minute and 30 seconds. So I know I'm usually about 20 minutes, 30 minutes, and I know this is a little longer, but I want to take an opportunity. First of all, if there's any questions, please feel free to ask any questions. I'm an open book, and if I can't answer it now, I'll usually create content around it. And if you see this later and you have more questions, then let me know. But again, it's always my expectation, not that that everybody retire early. My only expectation for any of you, and again, I do have expectations, is that you live your best life. We all have different sets of circumstances, and we all have different things that go on. And I talk about my journey in one of my videos, probably my other hour-long video, but I talk about my journey A to Z. And I could, if you'd like to see that, let me know, and then I could put a link to it in the comments. But it's we all have trials and tribulations, and I explain to people, not for a way that people take it the wrong way, but the reality is I'm a black dude in America. And with everything that's working against me, I was able to put together plans and processes in place that helped me get here, and make certain decisions that helped me get here. And so I want to share that with you, because I just don't think we talk about that enough. I think we have a bunch of people on YouTube that are trying to sell you products or get you to be part of their thing, their communities to make money. I'm just not that guy. I just want to share it. My personal mission statement is to uplift the human condition. And that's what I try to do. And I have the gift of gab. I can talk for hours. So that's kind of what I try to do. So it's really that simple. And and I always tell people, it's if I care enough about you to answer the question, then it's always going to be the truth. And I care enough about each and every one of you, and I will always be truthful in all of my answers to you 100% of the time. And if I can't answer the question, I won't lie to you. I just won't answer the question. I tell you I can't answer the question. So anyhow, if there's no more questions, have a good rest of your day, and I will talk to you soon.